Hi!
Cut it! Beautiful, Kale, beautiful.
He called him Cale, not Kyle, not Mr. MacLachlan, just Cale. And somehow, that one small, off-kilter detail tells you everything you need to know about David Lynch and the 42-year bond between a director who saw the whole universe as his canvas and the young actor from Yakima, Washington, who had no idea he was about to become part of it. David Lynch died on January 16, 2025. He was 78. When the news broke, Hollywood went quiet in the way it only does when someone truly irreplaceable is gone. And Kyle MacLachlan wrote, "I will miss him more than the limits of my language can tell and my heart can bear." This is the story of that friendship. The year was 1983. Kyle MacLachlan was 24 years old, raised on the dry eastern side of Washington state, a low desert region of vineyards and agricultural flatlands, sitting in the rain shadow of the Cascades, a world away from the misty alpine forests that most people picture when they think of the Pacific Northwest. He had never stood in front of a film camera in his life. He was performing Molière in a small theater outside Seattle when a casting agent came knocking on behalf of a project that had no business existing at all: David Lynch's adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune. The scale of it was staggering by any measure. 7 months of production in Mexico City, a cast that read like a Hollywood fever dream, and at the center of it all, Lynch needed someone to carry the entire weight of the story. A young nobleman destined to lead desert warriors into battle, a boy who would be mistaken for a god. What he found was a kid who could barely get through his screen test. MacLachlan has described that first audition in detail across several interviews. He was asked to deliver a monologue directly into the lens of the camera, an unusual and deeply uncomfortable thing for any actor, let alone someone with zero screen experience. He started the scene. He stopped. He started again. He lost his focus entirely, dropped his head, and told Lynch, "David, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure." He has recalled that Lynch hadn't even started calling him Cale yet, but whatever name he used, Lynch walked over, looked at him steadily, and said, "Kyle, I know you can do this. You've got this. Just relax, breathe, take your time." He said all the right things. MacLachlan would later reflect, he recognized immediately what the young actor needed. MacLachlan finished the scene. He got the part, and something was set in motion that neither of them fully understood yet. Dune opened in December 1984 to devastating reviews and nearly empty theater seats. The film was a commercial catastrophe, overlong, narratively dense, and received by the public with widespread bewilderment. Lynch has since made no secret of his own complicated feelings about it, describing it as a profound loss of creative control, a studio machine that swallowed his instincts whole. MacLachlan, meanwhile, found himself bound by a contract that tied him to potential sequels while prohibiting him from seeking other work. He was in professional limbo, unable to do anything but wait. He turned down Oliver Stone's Platoon. He turned down Top Gun. He dropped his agent entirely and moved to Los Angeles, where for a long stretch of time, nothing happened at all. He was waiting for Lynch to call again, and eventually Lynch did. Blue Velvet arrived in 1986, and with it, the real beginning. Where Dune had been someone else's vision filtered and ultimately distorted through Lynch's hands, Blue Velvet was Lynch uncut and entirely his own. A small American town, a white picket fence, a summer afternoon that looks like it was painted by Norman Rockwell, and underneath all of it, something rotting in the dark. MacLachlan played Jeffrey Beaumont, a college student who finds a severed human ear lying in a field and cannot leave it alone, cannot resist the pull of it, even when every instinct tells him he should walk away. Lynch biographer Chris Rodley would later describe MacLachlan as an on-screen incarnation of Lynch's own persona, the curious boy from the American heartland who keeps lifting rocks to see what lives beneath them. In a very real sense, Jeffrey Beaumont was David Lynch examining himself at a particular age, and MacLachlan was the mirror he chose to do it in. The film earned Lynch a Best Director nomination at the Academy Awards. More critically, it gave the two men something no contract or commercial arrangement could have manufactured, a shared creative language that required very few actual words. MacLachlan has described it plainly. If he said, "There's a wind blowing," it meant there was mystery in the scene. When he said, "Elvis," I knew exactly what he was looking for. He doesn't use actor jargon, and I appreciated that. No lengthy rehearsal notes, no formal directorial instruction, just two people who had learned, through instinct and accumulated trust, how to communicate in the middle of making something strange. That economy of language would define their entire collaboration, and it was tested, truly tested, when the scale of what they were attempting together grew beyond anything either of them had imagined. The idea for Twin Peaks came through Lynch's newly formed creative partnership with writer Mark Frost. The two of them brought together by agent Tony Krantz, who believed their particular combination of instincts might produce something no one had seen before. Frost had spent years writing for Hill Street Blues and understood the architecture of serialized television, the long-form structure, the network rhythms, the way a story could be sustained across weeks and months. Lynch had never worked in television, and by his own account, didn't especially understand it. What he had instead was something Frost could not manufacture on his own, the ability to make you feel a story before you could name what you were feeling. Together, they created a world set in the fictional lumber town of Twin Peaks, Washington, a place that, on the surface, resembled the idealized American small towns Lynch had grown up around, and beneath that surface contained everything he had always suspected was hiding there. The central mystery was the murder of a young woman named Laura Palmer, but that was almost beside the point. What Lynch and Frost were actually building was a sustained atmosphere, a place where the ordinary and the deeply wrong existed side by side without either canceling out the other. Lynch told MacLachlan from the beginning, "You are Dale Cooper. No formal audition, no chemistry readings against other actors, just certainty," the same quality that had characterized their dynamic from the very first screen test. Cooper was an FBI agent, yes, but he was also something more specific and harder to categorize. A man of rigorous moral clarity, dropped into a world where the moral geometry had gone sideways, who responded not with cynicism, but with an almost childlike sense of wonder. MacLachlan has acknowledged that he built the character partly by borrowing from Lynch himself, the enthusiasm for Douglas firs and freshly brewed coffee, the Eagle Scout earnestness, the way he could walk into a room full of inexplicable strangeness and hold himself together without flinching. He has such great enthusiasm for certain things, MacLachlan recalled. Trees, coffee, pie. He's so childlike in his wonder of these things, and I wanted a little bit of that in Cooper. In a sense, Cooper was Lynch's idealized self projected outward, walking through a story that Lynch's own imagination had built for him to inhabit. The pilot shot in roughly 23 days in the Pacific Northwest in the bitter cold of early 1989. Nobody, cast, crew, or network, thought it would go anywhere. MacLachlan has recalled that all of them assumed they were making something closer to a glorified movie of the week. ABC would glance at it, he figured, and politely pass. They were shooting up in the Northwest, running fast. Freezing outside between setups. Nobody from the network was hovering over them. Nobody seemed to care what they were doing. Accidents kept happening, the kind that, on a Lynch set, had a way of becoming more significant than anything planned. MacLachlan tells one particular story about the pilot's final scene that reveals something essential about Lynch and how he moved through the world. Grace Zabriskie is lying in bed. The camera is on her. She sits up, her face registering something just beyond the frame, something unseen and terrible. Lynch calls cut and declares it beautiful. But cinematographer Iran Garcia pulls him aside. Someone's face has appeared in the mirror behind her. A crew member. The set dresser, a man named Frank Silva, had been accidentally captured in the reflection. A contaminated take. On any conventional production, it gets reshot and forgotten. Lynch asked whose face it was. When he heard the name, he went quiet. And then he decided to build an entire character out of that accident. Frank Silva became B.O.B., the demonic presence at the center of the show's mythology, a figure who had slipped into the story through a mirror and against the production's apparent will. It was in every sense a Lynch moment, the unplanned thing that turned out to be the realest thing of all. On April 8, 1990, the Twin Peaks pilot aired on ABC opposite Cheers, which was then one of the highest-rated shows on American television. Media commentators predicted a quiet, quick death. Instead, the debut was watched by 29% of the entire American viewing public. In an era before social media, before streaming, before prestige television had even acquired that name, the show became an overnight cultural phenomenon, unlike anything the medium had produced. Viewers gathered every week around a single question: who killed Laura Palmer? And the answers spread through offices and living rooms and phone conversations the way only a true shared national experience can. Magazines that had never covered television put it on their covers. The New York Times wrote about it the way it wrote about films. Kyle MacLachlan, as Agent Dale Cooper, became one of the defining faces of early 90s American pop culture. A man who talked to a tape recorder, ordered coffee with the reverence of a religious observance, and somehow made obsessive detail feel like the most compelling thing in the room. Behind the camera, the show's success brought complications that Lynch had not anticipated and did not especially welcome. Network notes started arriving. Opinions accumulated about tone, about pacing, about what the show was and wasn't allowed to be. Other directors were brought in to handle episodes Lynch and Frost couldn't personally oversee. And while some were talented by any objective measure, MacLachlan has been candid about the friction that created. You'd weigh everyone against David, he said. It was always, okay, it's not David, but we'll make it work. There was only one person who fully understood the specific emotional register of the world they had built together, and that person could not be in 20 places at once. The pressure to resolve the central mystery came from multiple directions simultaneously. Audience appetite was turning. Viewers who had been gripped by the question of who killed Laura Palmer were beginning to grow frustrated with the deferral of the answer. Network executives, watching ratings shift, added their own weight to the equation. The mystery was resolved partway through the second season, earlier than Lynch and Frost had intended. The show lost something in that resolution, a particular kind of suspense that, once discharged, couldn't be rebuilt. The The second season aired, found its footing in places and lost it in others, and was canceled by ABC in 1991. The final image left on screen was MacLachlan's face, Cooper possessed, staring into a mirror asking, "How's Annie?" in a voice that didn't belong to him. It was a cliffhanger that would remain unresolved for 25 years. And then Laura Palmer's promise, made in the finale, came due. "I'll see you again in 25 years." Between them, there had been one crack in the foundation. By the time Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me was being assembled in 1992, Lynch's theatrical prequel to the series, MacLachlan had grown wary of being permanently defined by Agent Cooper. He took a reduced role in the film. He has acknowledged since that tensions had developed during the later part of Season 2, when Lynch and Frost stepped back from the show's day-to-day production, and MacLachlan felt, in his own word, abandoned. They worked through it, the friendship held, but it was a reminder that even the deepest creative partnerships have weight, and weight, over time, creates pressure. When Lynch and MacLachlan finally returned for Twin Peaks: The Return in 2017 on Showtime, what they made defied every expectation that had accumulated over a quarter-century of anticipation. 18 episodes that functioned less like a television series than like something that had not previously had a name, part dream, part elegy, part the most ambitious piece of sustained visual storytelling Lynch had ever attempted. MacLachlan was asked to play 3 separate versions of his character within the same story. The villainous doppelganger Mr. C, cold and predatory and barely recognizable. The childlike amnesiac Dougie Jones, a man stripped down to pure instinct, navigating the world with the helpless wonder of someone encountering it for the first time. And eventually, after the audience had waited 18 episodes for it, the real Dale Cooper. It was the most demanding acting assignment of his career by a significant margin. He has spoken about the experience of filming The Return with a gratitude that is almost difficult to look at directly. Every morning, he would wake at 4 o'clock, make his coffee, and sit alone in the kitchen before the house came alive. And the one thought that carried him through was simple. "I get to go to work today with David." Whatever was being asked of him, and the demands were extraordinary, the fact of Lynch's presence made it not just bearable, but something he has described as the most blessed period of his professional life. "He always had confidence in me," MacLachlan said, "even when I was uncertain. That confidence extended first on a film set in Mexico City to a 24-year-old who couldn't get through his own screen test, had never once been withdrawn. It was the one constant that ran through everything." There is a word Lynch used to refer to MacLachlan across 4 decades. Not his full name, not a nickname in the conventional sense, just Cale, a small private distortion of the familiar, the kind of thing that accumulates between 2 people over years of shared experience and becomes, eventually, its own kind of language. MacLachlan signed every tribute he wrote after Lynch's death with that name, "Forever Your Cale," as if to say, whatever the world knew me as, this is who I was to you, and that is the thing I am most grateful for. Lynch died on January 16th, 2025. He had been diagnosed with emphysema the previous year, a consequence of a lifetime of heavy smoking, and had acknowledged quietly that he would likely never direct again. He spent his final months at home in Los Angeles, painting, recording music, and delivering what had become legendary daily weather reports to a devoted social media following that had learned, over many years, to look for meaning in everything he did. When MacLachlan sat down to write his tribute, he wrote it the way Cooper would have recorded a message to Diane, directly, without performance, putting the truth of the thing into language and trusting the language to hold it. He wrote about the moment in 1983 when a man he barely knew looked at him and said, "You've got this." He wrote about a friendship built through a severed ear and a dead girl wrapped in plastic, and a damn fine cup of coffee, and a mirror that accidentally captured something that was never supposed to be there. That is not the language of a professional tribute. That is a man trying to describe the most important relationship of his life before the words run out entirely. Lynch's family said there is now a big hole in the world. MacLachlan said his world is that much emptier. Somewhere in the space between those two statements is the shape of something that resists full naming, the particular kind of loss that comes from someone who saw you clearly before you saw yourself, who called you by a name only he used, who put you in front of a camera when you didn't know what you were doing and told you with complete and apparently groundless certainty that you were going to be great. As it turned out, he was right. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt that pull toward Lynch's work, that sense of something waiting just below the surface of a normal afternoon, we'd love to know what it was that first got you. The red curtains, the coffee, the moment the music shifts and you realize you're somewhere else entirely. Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this one are why you're here, the partnerships behind the art, the friendships that made the work possible, then subscribe. There's more where this came from. We'll see you in the next one.